The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Maya Johnson's apartment in New York City. She stood by the window, coffee cup in hand, watching the busy streets below. At 28, Maya had built a good life for herself. Her small office at MUN, the art museum, had her name on the door. She had friends who loved her. She had found love. But the phone call she received last night had brought back shadows she thought she'd left behind. "Miss Johnson? This is Dr. Reynolds. I'm calling about Richard Henderson. He's asked that we contact you. His condition has worsened." Maya hadn't spoken to her adoptive father in 6 years, not since that terrible Christmas when things had finally fallen apart for good. She had promised herself she would never go back to that house, never again walk through those grand doors that had never felt like home. She touched the small scar near her wrist, a habit when she was nervous. The Henderson family had adopted her when she was 7, after her parents died in a car crash. They lived in a huge house in Virginia with perfect green lawns and white columns. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. Maya was the poor black child rescued by the rich white family. The newspapers had loved the story. What a lucky girl, people would say when they met her, but luck had nothing to do with what happened inside those walls. Maya put down her coffee and picked up her phone. 3 missed calls from Adrian. Her husband worried about her. They had only been married for 6 months, but he knew her better than anyone ever had. She smiled, thinking about how they met. He had come to her museum to donate money, and she had been assigned to show him around. Adrian West wasn't what she expected from a tech billionaire. He was quiet, thoughtful, and actually listened when she spoke about art. By the end of the tour, he had asked her to dinner. By the end of dinner, she felt like she had known him forever. Maya had told Adrian about being adopted, but not everything. Not about how her adoptive brother Charles would accidentally trip her on the stairs. Not about how her adoptive sister Elizabeth would invite friends over just to make fun of Maya's hair. Not about how their mother would check her hands at dinner to see if they were clean enough while never checking her real children's hands. And definitely not about the times when she was punished. The phone rang again. "Adrian." She answered this time. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay? You didn't call last night." His voice was warm, concerned. "Richard is sick. Dying, maybe. They want me to come." The words felt strange coming out of her, mouth silence on the other end. Then, "Do you want to go?" Maya looked at the small painting on her wall. It was one she had made as a child, a family of stick figures with one figure standing slightly apart from the others. The art therapist her school had sent her to had been very interested in that painting. "I think I need to," she finally said. "I need closure, I guess." "I'll come with you," Adrian said immediately. "No," Maya said too quickly. "I mean, you have that big investor meeting this week. I'll be fine for a few days." She didn't want Adrian to see that house, those people. Didn't want her new life and old life to touch. "Are you sure? I can reschedule." "I'm sure. I'll call you every day. I promise." After they hung up, Maya booked a flight for the next morning. Then she opened her closet and pulled out a small box from the back shelf. Inside was a child's diary with a broken lock, some old photos, and a folded piece of paper. Her original birth certificate. Sometimes she needed to remind herself that she had existed before the Hendersons, that she had been born Maya Louise Johnson to parents who loved her. The photos showed a smiling black couple holding a baby. Maya had her mother's eyes and her father's smile, people used to say. She didn't remember much about them anymore, just warm hands and the smell of her mother's perfume. That night, she couldn't sleep. Memories kept floating up like bubbles in water. Elizabeth teaching her the proper way to speak. Richard's disappointed face when she brought home a B on her report card. The summer she was 16 when she'd stayed out past curfew, and they had, no. She wouldn't think about that. Night morning came too quickly. Maya packed a small suitcase, just enough for a few days. As she was about to leave, Adrian arrived at her door. "I thought you might want this," he said, handing her a small box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny key charm. "To Remind you that you always have a home to come back to, he said, fastening it around her wrist. Maya felt tears sting her eyes. I'll call when I land, she whispered, kissing him goodbye. The flight to Virginia was short but felt endless. Maya rented a car at the airport, plugging the familiar address into the GPS even though she didn't need directions. Some things you never forget. As she drove through the gates of the Henderson estate, her stomach tightened. Nothing had changed. The long driveway lined with oak trees, the perfectly trimmed hedges, the big white house standing like a giant wedding cake on top of the hill. Maya parked and sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel. She could still drive away, go back to New York, back to Adrian, back to safety. But then what? Would she spend the rest of her life running from shadows? Taking a deep breath, she got out of the car and walked to the front door. Before she could knock, it swung open. Well, well, look who finally showed up. Charles Henderson stood in the doorway, looking older but with the same cold eyes she remembered. The prodigal daughter returns. Behind him stood Elizabeth, arms crossed, her blonde hair now streaked with gray. We thought you might not come, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maya stepped inside, the familiar smell of lemon polish and old money washing over her. The grand staircase, the crystal chandelier, the portrait of the Henderson family hanging above the fireplace, a portrait she had never been included in. Where is Richard? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Father is resting, Elizabeth said. Dr. Reynolds says he doesn't have long. Would you like some tea? Charles asked with fake politeness. You must be tired after your journey. Something in his voice made Maya's skin crawl, the same tone he used to have right before something bad would happen. That would be nice, she said carefully. As they walked toward the kitchen, Maya texted Adrian quickly. Arrived safe. Call you tonight. She didn't see Charles and Elizabeth exchange glances behind her back. Didn't notice Elizabeth slip something, small and white, into the tea kettle as it began to whistle. Maya took the offered cup, not knowing that by the time she finished drinking it, her nightmare would truly begin. Maya's head pounded as she slowly opened her eyes. The world around her was blurry, unfocused. A sharp pain shot through her wrists when she tried to move. Where was she? What had happened? The last thing she remembered was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea with Charles and Elizabeth. The tea. Something had been in the tea. As her vision cleared, panic rose in her chest. She was in the old barn at the far end of the Henderson property. The musty smell of hay and aged wood filled her nostrils. Weak afternoon light filtered through cracks in the walls, and she couldn't move. Maya looked down and saw thick rope binding her to one of the barn's support posts. Her wrists were tied, behind her, around the wooden beam. Her ankles were bound together too. Her jacket was gone, leaving her in just her thin blouse. The spring evening was growing colder by the minute. Hello? She called out, her voice echoing in the empty space. Is anyone there? The barn door creaked open. Charles and Elizabeth walked in, their faces expressionless in the dim light. Finally awake, Elizabeth said, setting down a lantern on an old barrel. We were beginning to worry we'd given you too much. What are you doing? Maya asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear racing through her. Untie me now. Charles laughed, the sound bouncing off the barn walls. Always giving orders, always thinking you're in charge. He walked closer, towering over her. But you're not in charge here, are you? You never were. Maya pulled against the ropes, feeling them dig into her skin. This is crazy. You can't do this. Adrian will be looking for me. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. Your precious husband doesn't know where you are. We took your phone. She pulled Maya's cell from her pocket and waved it. No calls to Billionaire? Hubby, no one coming to rescue you. People know I'm here, Maya insisted. The hospital staff, Dr. Reynolds. Actually, Charles interrupted. No one knows you're here. We told the staff you called to say you couldn't make it after all. Father is too far gone to know the difference. Maya felt cold fear spreading through her body. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Elizabeth. crouched down to Maya's eye level. Her perfect blonde hair framed a face tight with hatred. Why? You have the nerve to ask why? She gripped Maya's chin. Because you don't belong here. You never did. You were Father's charity project, his public image boost. Look at kind-hearted Richard Henderson adopting the poor orphaned black girl. It made him look so good to his friends. And now he's dying, Charles added, pacing the barn floor. And guess what we found out? He's planning to leave you a third of everything. He kicked an empty bucket, sending it flying across the barn. A third to you, when you're not even real family. Maya's mind raced. She hadn't expected anything from Richard, hadn't wanted anything. She'd built her own life, far away from their money and influence. I don't want his money, she said. Untie me and I'll sign whatever you want. Elizabeth laughed, a high, brittle sound. Oh, it's too late for that. You need to learn your place. You need to remember what happens when you step out of line. Chill ran down Maya's spine. Memories she had buried deep began to surface. Summer nights in this very barn, punishments they called lessons. How many times had they brought her here when they were teenagers? When their parents were away at charity functions or business trips? You did this to me before, Maya said slowly, the realization washing over her. When we were kids. Not just once, Charles said with a cold smile. Quite a few times. You don't remember all of them, do you? You were good at blocking things out. Maya closed her eyes as fractured memories crashed into her consciousness. Being locked in the barn overnight for getting a better grade than Elizabeth. Being tied up like this when she was 16 after Charles caught her talking to his friend at a party. The rope burns she would hide with long sleeves. After a night out here, you'll be ready to sign away anything, Elizabeth said, standing up and brushing dust from her expensive pants. And if you don't, well, maybe you'll have an unfortunate accident while visiting. So sad, so tragic. People change, Maya said, trying to appeal to whatever humanity might be left in them. We're adults now. We can talk about this. Charles laughed. People don't change. You should know that better than anyone. He pulled something from his pocket. A photo. He held it in front of Maya's face. It was a picture of her as a child, maybe 8 or 9, standing apart from the rest of the family in their holiday photo. Always the outsider, he said. Always wanting what wasn't yours to have. We'll be back in the morning, Elizabeth said, picking up the lantern. Maybe by then you'll be more cooperative. They walked to the door, Charles turning back one last time. It's getting cold tonight. Better hope those old memories keep you warm. The barn door closed with a heavy thud, and Maya heard the sound of a padlock clicking into place. She was alone in the growing darkness, tied to a post in a barn she had tried so hard to forget. Maya tested the ropes again, feeling them cut into her skin. They knew what they were doing. The ropes were tight, but not tight enough to cut off circulation. They didn't want her injured, not visibly anyway. Think, Maya, think, she whispered to herself. She looked around the barn. Nothing had changed. In all these years, the same wooden beams holding up the roof, the same stack of old equipment in the corner, the same small window high up on the wall, now showing the darkening sky. Maya felt something cool against her wrist, Adrian's bracelet. The one with the tiny key charm he had given her before she left. To remind you that you always have a home to come back to, he had said. Adrian. He was expecting her call tonight. When she didn't call, would he worry? Would he come looking for her? As night fell completely and the temperature dropped, Maya closed her eyes. She needed to stay calm, stay strong. Adrian would notice something was wrong. He knew her too well. And he had resources. So many resources. He'll come, she whispered to herself as the first tear slid down her cheek. He'll come. Outside, an owl hooted in the darkness. The wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the old barn walls. And Maya waited, fighting against memories that threatened to drown her, clinging to hope that seemed to fade with the dying light. Adrian West stood at his office window, phone in hand, staring at the city lights below. Something was wrong. Maya hadn't called. Not last night. Not this morning. He had tried calling her repeatedly, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Every time. She probably just forgot to charge it, his assistant had suggested earlier. But Adrian knew better. Maya never forgot to charge her phone. And she always kept her promises. He checked his watch. Almost noon. Making a decision, he turned and grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week," he told his assistant as he walked past her desk. "And call the airport. Tell them to ready my jet." Within the hour, Adrian was in the air flying toward Virginia. As the plane cut through clouds, he scrolled through his photos of Maya, her bright smile, her thoughtful eyes. The strength she carried that most people missed because they were too busy underestimating her. She had told him bits and pieces about her childhood with the Hendersons. Never the full story, but enough for him to know it had been painful. Enough for him to know she had good reasons for staying away all these years. He should have insisted on coming with her. When the plane landed, Adrian rented a car and drove straight to the Henderson estate. Rain clouds were gathering on the horizon as he approached the iron gates. The property was even larger than he had imagined, with manicured lawns stretching toward a massive white house that looked like something from another century. A woman in a housekeeper's uniform answered his knock at the front door. "I'm looking for Maya Johnson," Adrian said politely. "She arrived yesterday to visit Richard Henderson." The woman's eyes darted briefly to something behind Adrian before returning to his face. "I'm sorry, sir. No one by that name has arrived." Adrian's instincts, the same ones that had helped him build his tech empire from nothing, told him she was lying. "I'm Adrian West, her husband," he said, keeping his voice calm. "There must be some mistake. She flew in yesterday morning." A tall man appeared, behind the housekeeper. His expensive clothes and the way he carried himself screamed old money. "Can I help you?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Charles Henderson?" Adrian asked, extending his hand. "I'm Adrian West, Maya's husband." Charles hesitated before shaking his hand. "Maya? We were expecting her yesterday, but she never showed up. We assumed she changed her mind." Adrian studied the man's face. The lie came too easily, too smoothly. "That's strange," Adrian said. "She texted me that she had arrived safely. May I come in? Perhaps we can sort this out." Charles hesitated again, then stepped aside. Of course. The inside of the house was like a museum. Beautiful, cold, untouched. A woman with blonde hair tied back in a tight bun came down the grand staircase. "Elizabeth, this is Adrian West, Maya's husband," Charles explained. Apparently she told him she arrived here yesterday. Elizabeth's surprise looked just as practiced as her brother's. "How odd. We've been worried too. Have you tried hospitals, perhaps? The roads can be dangerous." "I'll make some calls," Adrian said, taking out his phone. As he pretended to search for a number, he activated an app, one of his company's experimental security programs. It would scan for Maya's phone, even if it was turned off. "While I'm doing this, could I trouble you for a glass of water?" he asked. As Elizabeth went to the kitchen, Adrian watched Charles carefully. The man was tense, his eyes constantly checking Adrian's movements. "How is your father?" Adrian asked conversationally. "Not well," Charles replied shortly. "The doctors don't expect him to last the week." Adrian nodded sympathetically, while his phone silently picked up a signal. Maya's phone was somewhere on the property. Elizabeth returned with water. "Any luck?" she asked. "Not yet," Adrian said, accepting the glass. "Would you mind if I looked around, just to ease my mind? Maya spoke so much about this place." "That's not necessary," Charles said quickly, and frankly a bit intrusive. Adrian switched tactics. "Of course, I understand. I'm just worried. You know, my company has been developing some impressive tracking technology. I can actually locate Maya's phone even if it's turned off." He held up his phone, showing a blinking dot on a map of the property. "It says her phone is somewhere here on your estate." The siblings exchanged quick glances. "That's impossible," Elizabeth said. Your technology must be wrong. My technology is never wrong, Adrian said calmly. Now, either you tell me where my wife is, or I call the police and have them search every inch of this property. The tension in the room thickened. Charles stepped forward, his face darkening, when a knock at the door interrupted them. An old man in gardening clothes stood there, hat in hand. Excuse me, Mr. Charles, there's a problem with the irrigation system near the old barn. I need you to take a look. Something in the old man's eyes caught Adrian's attention. A message. A warning. I'll be back in a moment, Charles said to Adrian. Don't go anywhere. He followed the gardener outside. As soon as they were gone, Adrian slipped away from Elizabeth, finding a side door that led to the gardens. Rain had started to fall, light at first, but quickly getting heavier. In the distance, he could see the old groundskeeper pointing Charles toward something, deliberately leading him away from a weathered barn on the far side of the property. Adrian circled wide, keeping to the trees until he reached the barn. A heavy padlock secured the door. Looking around for something to break it, he found a shovel leaning against the wall. The lock broke after several hard hits, the sound hidden by the growing storm. When he swung the door open, the dim interior revealed a figure tied to a post. Maya, her head hanging down, barely conscious. Maya. He rushed to her, heart pounding. Her skin was cold, her wrists raw from the ropes. She lifted her head slowly, as if it took all her strength. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Adrian? How? Shh, he said, working at the knots. I'm getting you out of here. As the ropes fell away, Adrian helped Maya to her feet, but her legs gave out. She was too weak to walk after being tied up for so long. I've got you, he whispered, lifting her into his arms. But as he turned toward the door, he found their path blocked. The old groundskeeper stood there, breathing hard. Hurry, he wheezed. They're coming back. I couldn't keep him away longer. Who are you? Adrian asked. Tom, the old man said. I've worked here 40 years. Seen too much, said nothing. Not anymore. He pointed to a back door. That way, through the trees. The storm will cover your tracks. Adrian carried Maya toward the door, pausing beside the old man. Thank you. Tom nodded, his weathered face solemn. Take care of her, she was always the good one. The storm had grown fiercer, rain coming down in sheets. Adrian protected Maya with his body as he carried her through the muddy ground, away from the barn. My car's at the front gate, he said. They'll see us, Maya whispered against his chest. There's another way. Behind the east garden, a service road. Adrian changed direction, moving as quickly as he could through the rain and wind. Behind them, they heard shouting. Charles had discovered the broken lock. They're coming, Maya warned, trying to stand on her own. Put me down, I'll slow you down. Never, Adrian said firmly, holding her tighter. I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever. Lightning flashed across the sky, revealing the path ahead, and the silhouettes of Charles and Elizabeth running toward the barn. They hadn't been spotted yet. The wind howled through the trees, covering the sound of their escape as Adrian pushed forward through the storm, carrying his wife away from the nightmare of her past, determined to reach safety. The rain came down in sheets, turning the ground beneath Adrian's feet into mud. Each step was a struggle as he carried Maya through the storm. Lightning flashed across the sky, briefly illuminating their path through the woods. Thunder followed, almost immediately shaking the trees around them. We need to find shelter, Adrian shouted over the noise of the storm. Maya's body trembled against his chest, from cold, from fear, from exhaustion, he couldn't tell. Maybe all three. The gardener's shed, Maya said weakly, pointing to their right. Behind those trees. Adrian changed direction, his expensive shoes sinking into the mud with every step. The small wooden shed appeared through the rain like a mirage. Adrian kicked the door open and carried Maya inside. It wasn't much, just a small space filled with tools and bags of soil, but it was dry and out of sight. He gently set Maya down on an old wooden chair and shrugged off his wet jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders. Are you hurt? he asked, kneeling in front of her, examining her wrists where the ropes had left angry red marks. Maya shook her head. Nothing serious. Her voice was stronger now. How did you find me? You didn't call, Adrian said simply, as if that explained everything. And for them, it did. I traced your phone to the property, but it was Tom who helped me find the barn. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Tom. He was always kind to me. The only one who ever was. Adrian took her cold hands in his. What happened, Maya? Why did they do this to you? Lightning flashed again, illuminating her face, tired but with a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Money. Richard is dying and apparently leaving me part of his estate. They couldn't stand the thought of it. She looked down at their joined hands. But it's more than that. It's what it's always been. They never saw me as family, never saw me as equal. I was just a prop in Richard's image makeover. Her voice cracked. And now I know this wasn't the first time they did this to me. They used to, when we were younger. Adrian's jaw tightened. They did this before? When you were a child? Maya nodded slowly. I had blocked it out. But being in that barn again, it all came back. The punishments whenever I stepped out of line. Whenever I did too well at school or got attention they thought should be theirs. Adrian stood up, anger radiating from him in waves. I'm going to destroy them, he said, reaching for his phone. I'll call the police right now. Wait, Maya said, grabbing his arm. The storm, there's no signal out here. Adrian checked his phone and saw she was right. No bars. We need to get to the car, he said. Get you to a hospital. They'll be watching the roads, Maya warned. We need to wait out the storm. As if in response, a massive crack of thunder shook the tiny shed, and the rain intensified, drumming on the roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. Adrian paced the small space, tension radiating from his body. I recorded part of our conversation with them at the house, he said. When they denied you were there. It's not much, but it's a start. Maya wrapped his jacket tighter around her shoulders. Charles has always been careful. He knows how to cover his tracks. Not this time, Adrian said firmly. This time we have evidence, your injuries, my recording, and I bet Tom would testify. The shed door burst open, banging against the wall. Charles stood in the doorway, rain pouring off him, a shotgun in his hands. Behind him, Elizabeth huddled under an umbrella, her face twisted with rage. How touching, Charles sneered, pointing the gun at Adrian. The billionaire hero comes to save his damsel. Adrian stepped in front of Maya. It's over, Charles. Put the gun down. Charles laughed, the sound sharp and dangerous. Over? This is just getting interesting. He gestured with the gun. Both of you. Outside. Now. Adrian didn't move. And then what? You'll shoot us both and claim it was an accident? 2 bodies are harder to explain than 1 missing person. We own the sheriff, Elizabeth said from behind Charles. We own this whole county. No one will question what we say happened. Maya stood up slowly, Adrian's jacket falling from her shoulders. This has to stop, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. It's been 20 years, Charles, 20 years of hate. For what? What did I ever do to you except exist in your house? You took what wasn't yours, Charles shouted, the gun shaking in his hands. Father's attention, his love, his money, you weren't even his real daughter. I never asked for any of it, Maya shouted back. I was a child who lost her parents. I needed a home, not a competition. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the rain and thunder. Then Tom appeared behind Elizabeth, silent as a ghost. In one quick movement, he grabbed the shotgun barrel and pushed it toward the ceiling. It went off with a deafening blast, sending splinters of wood raining down from the shed roof. Adrian lunged forward, tackling Charles to the ground. The gun fell and slid across the wet floor. Elizabeth screamed and tried to run, but Maya blocked her path, all the years of fear and anger giving her strength she didn't know she had. You don't get to run away from this, Maya said, grabbing Elizabeth's wrist. Not this time! Thunder crashed again, and a blinding flash of lightning struck a tree just outside the shed. The ancient oak groaned, its trunk splitting. Adrian looked up just in time to see it falling toward them. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing Maya and pulling her away from Elizabeth. The tree crashed through the side of the shed, sending tools and shelves flying. Wood splintered and glass broke. A lantern tipped over, spilling oil that caught fire despite the rain coming through the broken roof. In the chaos, Charles scrambled for the gun again. Adrian saw him and dove across the shed, fighting for control of the weapon. They struggled, rolling on the wet ground as the fire spread, catching on bags of fertilizer and old rags. "Adrian!" Maya screamed as smoke began to fill the small space. Tom grabbed her arm. "This way!" he shouted over the storm, pulling her toward the broken wall. "We need to get out!" "Not without Adrian," Maya insisted, pulling away. Through the smoke and rain, she could see Adrian and Charles still fighting for the gun. Elizabeth was nowhere to be seen. She must have fled when the tree fell. The fire was spreading quickly now, fueled by chemicals and dry wood. Smoke made it hard to breathe, hard to see. "Adrian!" Maya called again, coughing. The gun went off again, the sound muffled by the storm and fire. Maya's heart stopped. Who had been shot? A figure emerged from the smoke, tall and strong. Adrian, his face streaked with soot, his clothes torn. "Charles?" Maya asked. Adrian shook his head. He ran. "The fire's spreading too fast. We need to go now." Together they stumbled out of the burning shed, Tom leading the way through the storm. Behind them, the small building was engulfed in flames, heat pushing against their backs as they ran toward the trees. "This way," Tom shouted, pointing toward lights in the distance. "The main house. You can call for help from there." As they ran through the storm, Maya looked back once at the burning shed, a small, bright spot in the darkness of the night. 20 years of fear going up in flames. 3 days later, Maya sat in a hospital room, watching rain tap gently against the window. The storm had passed, but smaller showers still swept across the Virginia countryside. Her body was healing. The rope burns on her wrists now covered with soft bandages, the dehydration treated with IV fluids. The emotional wounds would take longer to heal, but for the first time in years she felt like healing was truly possible. Adrian entered with 2 cups of coffee, setting one on her bedside table before sitting in the chair next to her bed. Hivli Ibe hadn't left her side since they arrived at the hospital, except to give his statement to the police or to grab food and coffee. "How are you feeling?" he asked, taking her hand gently. "Better," Maya said, giving him a small smile. "The doctor says I can leave tomorrow." Adrian nodded. "That's good news." He hesitated. The police called. They found Charles. Maya's hand tightened around his. "Where?" "Trying to cross the state line." Elizabeth was with him. They had packed. Bags, cash, passports, they were running. Maya took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "And now?" "They're in custody. The charges are serious. Kidnapping, assault, attempted murder. With my recording, Tom's testimony, and your statement, they won't be able to talk their way out this time." Maya looked down at their joined hands. It's hard to believe it's really over. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse stood there with a frail old man in a wheelchair. Richard Henderson looked nothing like the powerful man Maya remembered. His face was gaunt, his once commanding presence diminished by illness. "He insisted on seeing you," the nurse explained. "The doctor says just a few minutes." Maya nodded, and the nurse wheeled Richard into the room before stepping outside to give them privacy. For a long moment, no one spoke. What could be said after everything that had happened? "I'm sorry," Richard finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard what they did, what they've been doing all these years." His hands trembled in his lap. "I didn't know." Maya felt a mix of emotions, anger, pity, a strange kind of grief. "You didn't want to know," she said quietly. "There were signs. You chose not to see them." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "You're right. I was not the father you deserved." He looked at Adrian. "Thank you for saving her. For being what I never was." Adrian simply nodded, his face unreadable. Richard pulled an envelope from his pocket with shaking hands. I've changed my will. Everything goes to you, Maya. Use it. Don't use it. That's your choice. But it's yours. He held out the envelope. Along with this, Maya hesitated before taking it. Inside was a yellowed newspaper clipping and a small faded photograph. The photo showed her birth parents, young, smiling, full of hope. The newspaper clipping was an obituary, detailing the car accident that took their lives. I kept it all, these years, Richard said. I told myself it was to protect you from painful memories, but really I think I wanted to erase who you were before you came to us. I wanted to remake you into what I thought you should be. His voice broke. That was wrong. So wrong. Maya stared at the photo, at the faces so like her own. Why did you adopt me? Really? Richard was quiet for a moment. At first it was for the image, yes, the publicity, the praise for taking in an orphaned black child. He sighed heavily. But you were so smart, so kind, despite everything, so determined. I grew to admire you, Maya, even if I never showed it properly. And Charles and Elizabeth, did you know how they felt? I knew they were jealous, Richard admitted. I thought it was normal sibling rivalry. I never imagined they would. He couldn't finish the sentence. There's no excuse. I failed you. All of you. The nurse returned, signaling that time was up. Richard reached for Maya's hand. After a moment's hesitation, she let him take it. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I just want you to know that in my own flawed way, I did come to love you, Maya, even if I never learned how to show it right. As the nurse wheeled him away, Maya felt tears on her cheeks, not for the father she'd just spoken to, but for the little girl who had once desperately wanted his approval, his protection, his love. Adrian put his arm around her shoulders. You okay? Maya nodded. I will be. A week later, Maya stood on the grounds of the Henderson estate, now hers. The house loomed behind her, full of painful memories but also valuable artwork, antiques, and history. Tom walked beside her, pointing out changes in the garden since she'd been gone. What will you do with it all? The old gardener asked. Maya looked around at the sprawling property. Transform it, she said. This place was built on pain, not just mine, but generations before. It's time to change that. Adrian joined them, carrying a large set of blueprints. The architect sent these over. Want to take a look? They spread the drawings on a garden table. Plans for converting the mansion into a healing center for survivors of trauma. Therapy rooms in place of formal sitting areas. Gardens designed for meditation and healing. A completely rebuilt barn, transformed into an art studio. It's perfect, Maya said, tracing the outlines with her finger. Tom nodded in approval. Your parents would be proud. Your real parents. Maya touched the small locket around her neck where she now kept the photo of her birth parents. I hope so. A car pulled up the driveway, and a group of people emerged. Contractors, designers, therapists, all here to help bring Maya's vision to life. Ready? Adrian asked. Maya took a deep breath and looked up at the house that had once been her prison. Soon it would be a place of healing for others who had experienced similar pain. More than ready, she said. 1 year later, Maya stood on the porch of the renamed Hope Haven Center on its opening day. Where once there had been cold grandeur, now there was warmth and welcome. The first group of residents would arrive tomorrow, women and children needing a safe place to heal, to grow, to reclaim their lives. Richard had passed away shortly after their hospital meeting. Charles and Elizabeth were serving their sentences, the truth of their actions finally exposed to the world. The family's dark secrets had been brought to light, and in that light, healing had begun. Adrian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Proud of you, he whispered into her hair. Maya leaned back against him, watching as the evening sun turned the gardens golden. I never thought I'd come back here, she said. Never thought this place could be anything but painful. You transformed it, Adrian said, just like you transformed yourself. Maya smiled. The rope burns on her wrists had faded to faint scars, reminders of what she had survived but no longer sources of pain. She had reclaimed this place, this history, this story, made it her own. Not just me, she said, turning to face him. We did it together. Behind them, the newly renovated house stood open and welcoming, ready to offer shelter to those who needed it most. And Maya, once tied to a post in darkness, now stood free in the light, her past acknowledged but no longer defining her, her future bright with promise and possibility.